Most mothers imagine their daughter's wedding day as a memory wrapped in soft light. Smiles, laughter, a moment to be cherished for decades. Mine wasn't. Mine felt like a punch served on silver platters. I'm Eleanor Ellie Brooke, 66 years old, and until that evening, I had become an expert at fading into the background. It was the safest way to live. But safety had a price, and that price came due the night my daughter decided to introduce me to her new in-laws, not with love, but with cruelty. If this story touched your heart, friends, please like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more touching stories. Thank you for being here. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and polished marble, filled with more people than I had ever seen in one place. Devon's family was wealthy, old money wealthy, the kind who attended galas simply because nothing else was interesting enough. I stood quietly with the small gift I had wrapped in myself, cream paper, a ribbon I'd ironed to smooth out wrinkles, just waiting for the right moment. Instead, Jasmine's voice sliced through the chatter like a blade. "That's the woman I told you about, the one who can't keep up with anything, the one who makes everything embarrassing." Laughter erupted, sharp, cold, and far louder than she had anticipated. It rolled across the room like a wave, crashing over me before I could steady myself. The guests stared as though I had wandered into the wrong event wearing a costume. For a moment, I truly wished I could vanish. But something happened then, something Jasmine never expected. A man near the front table, in a tailored charcoal suit and polished shoes, stopped laughing. His shoulders stiffened. His expression drained of amusement instantly. He stared at me as if someone had whispered a secret in his ear. It was Mr. Aldrich Sterling, Devon's father, the patriarch of the Sterling business empire, and a man whose handshake could shift the future of half the companies in the state. He stepped forward slowly, almost cautiously, eyes narrowing with disbelief. "Wait," he murmured. I know you." My heart thudded. No one in that room knew anything real about me, not even Jasmine. She believed the version she'd crafted for herself. The poor widow who worked night shifts cleaning office floors, the woman who didn't deserve space in the glittering world her daughter wanted to belong to. And yes, those parts were true. I did scrub offices for decades. I did wear discount store coats that had been mended more times than I could count. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the years I spent wiping those polished desks were the years I quietly built something far greater than anyone imagined. Mr. Aldrich's breath hitched. His gaze flicked between my face and some memory he clearly wished would disappear. "You," he whispered, "aren't you?" I said nothing. Silence has always been my ally. The laughter around us faltered as more guests noticed the shift in his expression. One table at a time, conversations died. Even Jasmine, radiant in silk and diamonds, finally sensed something wasn't right. Her smile froze. "What's wrong?" she asked, placing a hand on her father-in-law's arm. "It's just my mom, the one who—" But she didn't finish, because he finally spoke the words she feared most. "Aren't you my new employer?" Jasmine paled. The room went completely still. And for the first time in 30 years, I felt the truth begin to rise, no longer willing to hide. But that revelation was only the beginning, because while the guests stared and Jasmine trembled, none of them knew the real story behind how a cleaning woman became the silent owner of an empire. Want to know what happened next? Jasmine blinked rapidly, as if her mind were trying to reboot. Even through her flawless makeup, I watched panic bloom across her face. The ballroom, moments ago buzzing with self-satisfied laughter, now crackled with stunned silence. "My employer?" she echoed weakly, looking between us. "Dad, she's my mother. She cleans offices. You must be confused." But Aldrich Sterling wasn't confused. I could see the exact moment recognition snapped fully into place in his mind. His breath stuttered. His hand trembled as it slid into his pocket, retrieving his phone with desperate urgency. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was searching through his emails. Jasmine tried to laugh. It came out strained, brittle. "Dad, come on, there's no way." He held up a hand. "Quiet, Jasmine." It wasn't a request. He found what he was looking for, an email labeled "Confidential, Transfer of Ownership," and tapped it with a shaking finger. The screen lit up with a corporate profile photograph. My photograph. Not of Eleanor Brooke, the aging widow with calloused hands, but of E.B. Rowan, the discreet investor whose companies had quietly bought out Sterling Industries just 3 weeks earlier. A persona I had crafted with precision over decades. A name Jasmine had never heard, yet a name her new father-in-law had been answering to since the day he signed the contract surrendering his family company. His voice cracked as he spoke. "You bought us. You're the one who finalized the acquisition. You're the one my board answers to now." Jasmine's mouth dropped open so wide she looked as though she had forgotten how to breathe. No, that's impossible. Mom, tell him he's mistaken. Tell him something." I didn't. I simply stood there, holding the little wrapped box that now felt an absurdity in my hands. Aldrich looked at me with something deeper than shock. Respect. Fear. Reverence. "You said your name was Ellie. The initials, E.B. I never connected them." He laughed, but it wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. "God, the entire corporate world has been trying to figure out who you are for years." And now the entire ballroom knew that the woman they'd mocked and dismissed had been sitting atop a fortune larger than half the guest list combined. A murmur arose around us, a swarm of whispers. She's the buyer? She owns Sterling Industries? She was cleaning offices. How? Jasmine stumbled closer, her voice hoarse. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" The question held layers: hurt, confusion, and something far uglier, greed awakening. I finally spoke, my voice steady. "Because you never asked who I was. You only ever told me who you wanted me to be." Her lips trembled. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said gently, "while you were ashamed of my job, I was building something you never cared to understand." Aldrich lowered his phone. His tone was almost reverent. "Ms. Rowan." "Ellie," I corrected softly. "No, Ellie. Would you permit me to properly introduce you to the family as the woman who rescued our company from collapse?" Jasmine looked as though the floor had dissolved beneath her feet. For decades, I had been overlooked, dismissed, underestimated. Tonight was the first time anyone truly saw me. But revealing the truth was only the spark. What happened in the hours and days after this moment would change every relationship in my life, especially with my daughter. Want to see how Jasmine reacted once the shock settled? The ballroom never regained its festive rhythm. Music drifted on, but no one danced. The moment Aldrich Sterling called me his new employer, the entire event shifted from a wedding to a spectacle. People hovered near me with unsure smiles, as if approaching a wild animal they'd misjudged. Others pulled out their phones, pretending not to film. I could feel the weight of curiosity pressing in on all sides. But the person who reacted the strongest, the one who could no longer hide from her own actions, was my daughter. Jasmine kept staring at me as though I were a stranger who'd stolen her mother's face. After Aldrich introduced me formally, publicly acknowledging me as the majority owner of Sterling Industries, a polite applause rippled through the room, half-hearted, nervous, a performance of respect rather than the real thing. But Jasmine didn't clap. She grabbed my arm so tightly I felt her nails through my sleeve. "We need to talk," she hissed. I followed her out of the ballroom not because she asked, but because I needed this confrontation just as much as she did. We stepped into a quiet corridor lined with framed art and velvet carpeting, still elegant but mercifully empty. She turned on me immediately. "How long?" Her voice shook with fury rather than fear. "How long have you been lying to me?" 30 years, I answered simply. Her mouth fell open. "You're admitting it just like that?" "Yes, 30 years?" She repeated it as if the number might change. "Mom, I thought you were cleaning offices because you had no other choice." "I was cleaning offices because it was my choice." Her voice rose. "Why? Why would anyone with money do such a thing?" "Because knowledge is the real currency, and being invisible lets you hear the kinds of conversations that move entire industries." She staggered back a step. "So, you were spying?" "Observing," I corrected. "Listening, learning, and investing carefully." Jasmine's chest heaved. "And you never thought to tell your own daughter?" I met her eyes. "You never saw me, Jasmine. You saw the version of me that made you feel superior." For a moment, she didn't speak. Her mask slipped, anger melting into something rawer, darker. "You embarrassed me. All these years, you let me think you were failing. You let me feel ashamed of you. And how did you treat me because of that shame?" I asked softly. She flinched. "You could have corrected me." "You never asked," I said again. Silence stretched between us, thick, suffocating. Then her voice dropped into a trembling whisper. "If you're this wealthy, if you're really who he says you are, then why did you dress like that tonight? Why live in that tiny apartment? Why hide everything?" "Because money reveals people, and I needed to know who loved me without it." Her breath hitched, but she wasn't finished. "So what now? Are you going to punish me, humiliate me the way you think I humiliated you?" "No," I said. "I don't need revenge." But she didn't believe me. She stepped closer, her voice sharp and small. "Are you going to cut me off? Disown me? Let everyone believe I treated a millionaire like trash?" I looked at her gently. "You didn't treat a millionaire like trash, Jasmine. You treated your mother like she didn't matter. That's the real issue here." She swallowed hard. A tremor moved through her, and in a trembling whisper, she asked the question she feared most. "Are you going to forgive me?" But forgiveness isn't given, it's earned, and Jasmine had no idea what I expected next. Ready to see the beginning of her unraveling? Jasmine's question, "Are you going to forgive me?" hung between us like a trembling chandelier, delicate and dangerously close to falling. I didn't answer right away. Forgiveness, to her, had always been transactional, something obtained with enough charm, enough tears, or enough pressure. But this wasn't a late homework assignment or a petty argument. This was 30 years of dismissal, mockery, and distance. "Forgiveness isn't the problem," I said finally. "Truth is." She frowned. "Truth? You spent years building a life where I didn't fit," I said softly. "Not because I embarrassed you, but because my existence didn't flatter your image." Her jaw clenched. "Mom, that's not—" "I announced you to your wedding guests as if I were a stain you couldn't scrub out. And now that you've learned I'm wealthy, suddenly you want to rewrite the relationship?" Her eyes flashed. "I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to make sense of everything." "You're trying," I agreed. "But are you trying because you want me or because you want what I have?" That hit her like a slap she didn't expect. She looked away, swallowing hard. "Money has never mattered to me," she muttered. I lifted an eyebrow. "Everything mattered to you if it made you shine brighter." She didn't argue. Maybe she finally couldn't. For the first time that night, Jasmine sagged against the wall. She looked small, fragile almost, as though the foundation of her carefully crafted world had just been kicked out from under her. "Mom," she whispered, I know I treated you terribly. I know I said unforgivable things, but I didn't know who you were. And that's the point. You shouldn't have needed to know who I was to treat me with decency. Tears spilled over her lashes. She tried to wipe them quickly, afraid someone might see her cracked facade. I don't want to lose you, she said hoarsely. I know it's selfish, but you're all I have left. I exhaled slowly. Her voice sounded genuine now, frightened, vulnerable, not the polished, cruel woman she'd become in front of crowds. For years, I said, I convinced myself I didn't need anyone, not after losing your father, not after realizing how the world treated quiet people. But the truth is, loneliness is a heavy coat, and you've been wearing your own version of it too. She blinked. What do you mean? I explained. You've spent your whole life performing, trying to fit in with wealthy families, trying to impress people who wouldn't notice you if you stopped shining for a single moment. That kind of life is its own prison. The corridor fell into a deep, thoughtful silence. I don't know if I can fix what I did, she whispered. But if you'll let me, I want to try. Emotions stirred in my chest, complicated, bittersweet. For years, I'd imagined what it would feel like to hear words like that from my daughter. I just never imagined they would come wrapped in fear and desperation. Just as I was about to respond, footsteps echoed from the ballroom. Devin appeared, slightly breathless. Jasmine, everyone's asking where you went. And your dad, he wants to speak with your mother again. Something urgent. Jasmine stiffened. Urgent? Devin nodded. Yes, he said it's about the acquisition and about your future. Jasmine's eyes darted between us, panic returning. What does he want from me? But I already had a sinking suspicion. What Aldrich Sterling revealed next didn't just shake Jasmine. It threatened to tear apart everything she was trying to rebuild with me. Want to know what he said? We returned to the ballroom, though the atmosphere had shifted into something colder, like the calm before a storm. Conversations silenced as soon as people spotted us entering, their curiosity prickling the air. It wasn't the admiration of guests watching a mother of the bride. It was the scrutiny reserved for someone far more dangerous. Aldrich Sterling stood near the head cable, his phone still in hand, but now he looked less shocked and more cautious, thoughtful, calculating. Not about the business, about family. When he saw me, he straightened his jacket and offered a respectful nod. Ms. Rowan, Ellie, thank you for returning. Jasmine clung to Devin's arm, tense and pale. Dad, what's going on? Why did you say you needed to talk about my future? He ignored her question at first, addressing me. I think we should speak privately, all of us. That alone sent murmurs across the room, but I nodded. All right. He led us into a smaller side lounge, still elegant but quieter, dimly lit by antique lamps. As soon as the door closed, Aldrich exhaled heavily, rubbing his temples. I've been reviewing our acquisition documents, he began, addressing me directly. Your firm, your conglomerate, now legally controls every strategic decision my company makes. I need to ask you something bluntly. I expect nothing less, I said. His eyes lifted, searching mine. Are you planning to dismantle Sterling Industries? Jasmine gasped. Dad, why would she? It's a fair question, I said, before he could scold her. Many quiet investors buy companies only to break them apart and resell profitable divisions. Aldrich nodded. Exactly. And if that's your intention, my employees, hundreds of them, will lose their jobs. My family, everything we've built, gone. Devin stepped forward. Sir, aren't you jumping to conclusions? Ellie saved the company. why would she destroy it? Aldrich didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to Jasmine. And you, he said slowly, your future is tied to this family. If this company falls apart, so does the lifestyle you married into. Jasmine flinched, as if slapped. Is this why you dragged me out of my own wedding reception? To warn me about money? No, Aldrich replied sharply. To warn you that your mother's decisions will determine the next decade of our lives. His gaze shifted back to me, and the room tightened. Ellie, he said carefully, I need to know what you want. My heartbeat slowed, steady and deliberate. What I wanted. Nobody had asked me that in years, maybe decades. People asked what I could clean, what I could fix, what I could sacrifice, but never what I wanted. I clasped my hands. I bought your company because I saw a chance to save something worth saving. Your employees are loyal, your infrastructure strong. Your finances? Not so much. Aldrich swallowed. He knew I was right. I have no intention of destroying Sterling Industries, I continued, but I do expect transparency, accountability, and leadership without arrogance. His shoulders sagged in relief. He sank into a chair, pressing a hand over his eyes. Thank God, he whispered. But Jasmine wasn't relieved. She looked terrified. So, what does this have to do with my future? She asked shakily. Aldrich hesitated, then delivered the blow. Because the board has asked that you step back from any representation of the Sterling family until we understand whether you and your mother are on steady ground. Public image matters, and right now, it looks disastrous. Jasmine's mouth fell open. You're saying I embarrassed the family? She choked. Aldrich didn't soften. Yes, very publicly. She turned to me, panic rising. Mom, fix this, please. But I didn't move. I didn't rush. I didn't rescue. Not this time. And Jasmine wasn't done spiraling because the next decision she made would drag her all the way to my doorstep, begging for a truth she wasn't ready to hear. Jasmine barely made it through the rest of her wedding reception. She smiled mechanically for photos, laughed too loudly at jokes she didn't hear, and clutched her champagne flute as if it were keeping her upright. But her eyes, those betrayed her completely. They flicked toward me every few minutes, full of a fear I had never seen in her before. Not fear of punishment, fear of losing control. When the night finally ended, she didn't approach me. She didn't hug me goodbye. She didn't even look in my direction. But the next morning at 7:14 a.m., she was banging at my apartment door so hard the neighbors peeked out. I opened it wearing my old robe, the same one she used to complain made me look, quote, poor. Her eyes darted past me into the apartment, scanning every corner like a detective examining a crime scene. Mom, she said breathlessly, pushing her way inside. We need to talk, now. I stepped aside. She stood in the middle of my living room. Worn carpet, thrift store furniture, secondhand books stacked on crates, looking both confused and suspicious. How does any of this make sense? She demanded. You're telling me you're this woman who buys companies, who has money, who literally owns my father-in-law's future? And you still live like this? Yes, I said, simply. Why? Because I chose to. She dragged her hands through her hair. For the first time in years, she looked like the girl who used to come to me crying over scraped knees, lost and overwhelmed. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything. The wedding, Dad's reaction, the way you talked last night. And then I thought, maybe Dad was wrong. Maybe he imagined it. Maybe this is all one big misunderstanding. Is that what you want? I asked. She hesitated. I just need to know the truth. Ah, there it was, the real reason she showed up. Truth wasn't her goal. Certainty was. And certainty, for Jasmine, was usually tied to money. You've been hiding something, she said slowly. I can feel it. But why hide it from me? Why pretend to be poor? Why let me believe things that weren't true? Because you believed what you wanted to. She flinched. That's not fair. It's honest. Silence stretched. Then she took a deep breath, the kind that precedes a confession. Devin and we're in trouble. I folded my arms. Financial trouble. She nodded, embarrassed. More than you think. Dad never told me the company was in such deep debt before the acquisition. And the wedding, the house, our lifestyle, everything is borrowed. Everything. How much? I asked quietly. She swallowed. Hundreds of thousands. She looked at me with the expression of someone hoping their nightmare had a hidden escape hatch. So if you really are who he thinks you are, if you really do have money, could you help us? She whispered. Not as a gift, as a loan. Something we'd pay back. We'd work hard, I swear. I studied her for a long moment. Not the daughter I wished I had. The daughter I actually had. A woman raised by appearances, pressured by status, shaped by people who valued money more than kindness. A woman I had protected silently, even when she mocked me, even when she chose others over me. Jasmine, I said gently, if I help you, it won't be because you're desperate. It will be because you're honest. She blinked, confused. Honest about what? Honest about why you really want me in your life. She paled. You think I'm only here for the money? I think, I said carefully, that you don't know why you're here yet. Her lips parted, hurt flickering across her face. For once, she had no argument ready. Then in a barely audible voice, she asked, What do you want from me? But Jasmine didn't expect my answer, because what I asked for wasn't money, labor, or anything she could buy. It was something she'd never given me before. Want to know what I demanded? Jasmine stood in the center of my living room, like someone awaiting a verdict. Her hands twisted nervously in front of her, eyes darting between me and the door, as if deciding whether she should stay or run. What do you want from me? She repeated, voice barely above a whisper. I sat down on the arm of the sofa. I want the one thing you've never offered freely. She swallowed. And what's that? Respect. She blinked, stunned, not by the word itself, but because it wasn't the price she expected. She had prepared for money, favors, conditions, collateral. Respect never crossed her mind. That's all? She asked, hesitant. Yes, I said, but that single word is heavier than any financial debt. She looked down, silently absorbing that truth. When she finally spoke, her voice was trembling. Mom, you're asking me to become someone different. No, I corrected softly. I'm asking you to become someone real. She pressed a hand to her forehead. I don't even know what that means. It means, I said gently, looking at me not as a burden or an embarrassment, but as a human being, your mother, a woman who survived things you know nothing about, a woman who deserved the same dignity you expect from others. Jasmine opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. But if I show respect now, you'll just think it's because you're wealthy. And that, I said, is why this will be difficult. A long silence followed. Then she said something that struck me harder than anything she'd said the night before. Mom, I was raised to admire the powerful and overlook the quiet. I didn't realize that was cruelty. I thought it was normal. My heart tightened. It wasn't an excuse, it was an explanation, a painful one. And now I'm trying to unlearn everything I grew up believing, but I don't know how to start. I gestured for her to sit. She did, hesitantly, like a guest instead of a daughter. Start, I said gently, by telling me the truth about your life. All of it, not the polished version you show to the world. She exhaled shakily. Okay. For the next 20 minutes, she spoke, slowly at first, then in a torrent of confessions. She told me about the pressure she felt marrying into wealth, the fear of not being enough for Devon's family, the desperation that drove her to overspend, overperform, overextend, the shame she felt showing them a mother who didn't fit their image, the debt, every terrifying number, and the loneliness of pretending everything was perfect. By the time she finished, tears streaked her cheeks, not the dramatic tears she used to manipulate people, but quiet, exhausted ones. I made a mess of everything, she whispered. I tried so hard to appear successful that I didn't notice how hollow I'd become. That, I said gently, is the most honest thing you've told me in years. She looked up hopeful. So, does that mean you'll help us? Maybe, but help isn't just money. Sometimes it's rebuilding the parts of yourself you've ignored. She wiped her eyes. And if I do that, will you still have room for me in your life? I reached out, touched her hand. There's always room, but you must walk through that door as my daughter, not as someone chasing wealth. She nodded, swallowing a sob. I can try. No, I corrected softly. You can change. A knock suddenly sounded at the door, startling both of us. Jasmine stiffened. Who could that be? I stood slowly. I think, I murmured, it's someone who's about to make everything far more complicated. Because when I opened that door, the person standing there brought news that threatened to unravel the fragile progress Jasmine had just made. Want to see who it was? I opened the front door slowly, half expecting a neighbor or a delivery mix-up. But the person standing in the dim hallway was neither. It was Devon. His usually composed expression was tight with worry, his tie crooked, his hair damp from the drizzle outside. He looked like he'd run the whole way. Ms. Brooke, he said, breathless, I'm so sorry to show up unannounced. Behind me, Jasmine shot to her feet. Devon? What are you doing here? He stepped inside, shaking water from his jacket. He was too polite to sit without being invited, but his eyes were full of urgency. I've been looking for you everywhere, he said to Jasmine. You didn't answer my calls. Your father is beside himself. The board called an emergency meeting this morning, and he stopped, realizing he'd said too much too quickly. Jasmine's eyes widened. What emergency meeting? About the acquisition? Devon hesitated. His gaze flicked toward me, full of apology. It's about you, Jasmine. The air shifted instantly. She stiffened. Me? Why? Devon sank onto the edge of my sofa, his shoulders slumped. He looked like a man carrying the weight of an entire family on his back. Jazz, the scandal from last night might harm our corporate image. He's trying to convince the board that everything is under control, but they're not buying it. Scandal? Jasmine choked. I apologized. It's not just the insult, Devon said gently. Someone leaked a video. Jasmine turned pale. Video? Devon nodded grimly. Of you yelling at your mother, of the guests laughing, of Mr. Sterling confronting you afterward. It's all over social media, Jazz. People are calling it the wedding shame clip. It's trending. Jasmine covered her mouth with her hands. No, 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 no. And, he added reluctantly, your father thinks the only way to settle the uproar is by making a public correction. What does that even mean? Jasmine's voice cracked. Devon exchanged a look with me, one that held a quiet plea for patience.
He wants you to formally distance yourself from last night's behavior, to issue a public statement, to rebuild a sterling family reputation. Jasmine looked confused. How? What do they want me to say? Devon's voice dropped. They want you to apologize to Ellie on camera and acknowledge her publicly. Jasmine froze. I did too, because I was not offended, but because I knew what this meant for her. She wasn't being asked to apologize to me. She was being asked to kneel before public opinion. Devon leaned forward. Jazz, this isn't optional. If you refuse, your father fears the board will demand that you step away from the family business entirely. And that would affect, well, everything. Jasmine's breaths came fast and shallow. They want me to announce to the world that my mother is, what, a powerful investor, the owner of the company? That I treated her like garbage without knowing? Devon nodded reluctantly. Yes. She turned to me slowly. Her face was a battlefield. Shame, fear, pride, old patterns fighting new awareness. She looked like someone being asked to burn the identity she'd spent years building. Mom, she whispered, I know I've hurt you. I know I have a lot to fix. But going on camera and announcing your wealth, that will change everything. People will talk. They'll judge. They'll think I'm only repairing our relationship because you're rich. I stepped closer. Maybe, or maybe they'll finally see the truth. Her eyes filled with tears. Which truth? That growth, I said gently, isn't something you hide behind closed doors. It's something you live out loud. She shook her head, terrified. I'm not ready for that. Devon took her hand. Ready or not, the board meets again at 5. She looked at me again, desperate, trembling. Mom, what should I do? I held her gaze. Only you can decide whether to protect your pride or your future. But Jasmine's decision at that moment would have consequences none of us saw coming. Consequences that would reshape everything between us. Ready for the final part?
Jasmine stood in the center of my living room, her phone vibrating non-stop in her hand as messages from her father, the board, and friends flooded in. She didn't look like the glamorous bride from the night before. She looked like someone cornered by her own reflection. Mom, she whispered, I'm scared. If I speak publicly, I'll be humiliated. If I stay quiet, I'll lose everything. Maybe, I said calmly, what you lose isn't what you truly need. Her lower lip quivered. What does that mean? It means, I replied, that sometimes you must choose between who you pretend to be and who you actually are. Devon squeezed her hand. Jazz, you don't have to do this for my family or the board. Do it for yourself. Fix things because they're broken, not because people are watching. She sank into the sofa, burying her face in her hands. For several seconds, there was only the sound of her shaky breathing. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red, but clearer. I'll do it, she said softly, but not the way they want. Devon frowned. What does that mean? Jasmine turned to me. I'll apologize publicly. I'll acknowledge how I treated you, but I won't announce your wealth. I raised an eyebrow. Why? Because it shouldn't matter, she whispered. You deserve respect whether you're broke or a billionaire. And if the world thinks I'm only apologizing because you're rich, then I haven't learned anything. A quiet warmth spread through me, slow, hesitant, fragile, but real. That was the daughter I had been waiting to meet. Later that afternoon, Jasmine sat at a small wooden desk in her apartment, her phone propped up as she prepared to record a video that would be seen by thousands. She wanted me beside her, but I shook my head. This is your truth, Jasmine, not mine. She nodded, took a breath, and pressed record. My name is Jasmine Sterling, she began, her voice trembling but strong. Yesterday, at my own wedding,
I humiliated my mother, the woman who raised me, the woman who sacrificed more than I ever realized. She paused, her throat tightening. And I did it because I cared more about appearances than people, more about approval than family. I let pride make me cruel. I'm ashamed of the person I was last night, but I'm trying to change. She didn't mention wealth, business acquisitions, or my identity, just us, our fractured bond, and her responsibility for breaking it. It was raw, imperfect, honest. When she posted it, the reactions were immediate: shock, mockery from some, admiration from others. But in the hours that followed, something unexpected happened. Empathy began to drown out judgment. People related to flawed daughters. People related to complicated mothers. And for the first time, Jasmine wasn't performing. She was growing. 6 months passed. Jasmine and Devin downsized, paid down their debts bit by bit, and rebuilt their marriage on a foundation far humbler, but much stronger. Jasmine visited me weekly, not for money, but for guidance, conversation, and sometimes just to sit in silence with someone who loved her without conditions. When her daughter was born, my granddaughter, she placed the tiny warm bundle in my arms and whispered, "Mom, thank you for not giving up on me." I kissed the baby's forehead. "Thank you for finding your way back." As I held that fragile life in my arms, I realized something I should have known years ago. Family isn't built by blood or wealth or image. Family is built by the courage to face the truth about who we've been and the hope of who we can still become.